to update equality laws to define a person's sex as their biological sex at birth. They say that current confusion around definitions of sex and gender cannot continue. Speaking on Radio 4's Today programme, the Tory Minister for Women and Equalities, Kemi Badenoch, was asked if under these new proposals would the only relevant paperwork in regards to the definition of sex be an original birth certificate.
It depends on what the circumstances are, and if we look at the origin of the Gender Recognition Act and the Equality Act, it's quite clear that the intentions in the law are being misinterpreted just because of changes, social changes. And what we are trying to do is re-emphasize that sex in the law means biological sex. It always has done, but there's been a lot of misinterpretation, and we are adding that clarification so that the law is clearer.
Is it only original at birth biological sex that will be relevant?
That is what biological sex means, Michelle. This is not a paperwork issue. This is a practical issue. We have scenarios like the woman I wrote about in my article who was raped in a women's toilet. Asking the man for his birth certificate would not have stopped that from happening. Okay. What we are trying to do is protect women's spaces. We are trying to create a chilling effect for those men who are predators, who are exploiting trans people and exploiting laws we have put in place to protect trans people.
Well, Labour have called the policy an election distraction. I've been speaking to the writer and journalist Rebecca Reid and Maya Forstater, Chief Executive of Sex Matters, which supports single-sex services. I began by asking Maya, should biological sex be the only thing relevant when defining someone in law?
When defining whether someone is male and female, it is biological sex that's the only thing that matters. Of course, there are lots of other things about people that also matter, but where we have rules that say only men can play this sport or only women can play this sport, only men or women can use this space for privacy, for dignity, for safety, then it's sex that matters.
But of course, it's not just sex that matters to a number of people in our community, and their gender matters to them sometimes more than anything else because it gives them a sense of who they are and they want to be accepted for who they are.
Absolutely. If a man wants to change his name, wants to use different pronouns about himself, wants to wear different clothes, that's acceptable. But what he can't do is force other people to pretend to believe that he's changed sex, because that's impossible. And it harms women's rights when we're forced to pretend that men are women, because men are stronger, they're faster. 98% of sex crimes are undertaken by men. And so where we have spaces that are single sex for women, that's for a good reason. And that's nothing to do with not accepting someone's gender presentation, what they want to wear, what they want to call themselves, what mannerisms they want to use in their personal life. But all men need to respect women's privacy and dignity and safety and not try to overrule their boundaries.
Rebecca?
I think it's a really complicated one, and I'm glad that we're agreed that it's right to respect how somebody wants to present. I think to me it's a bit like someone's religion. I don't think it would be appropriate in the workplace, for instance, if somebody believes in a faith that I don't believe in. I don't have to believe it, but I also shouldn't actively go out my way to make sure that they know that I don't believe it. It's about sort of respecting other people's beliefs in a meaningful way rather than kind of paying lip service to it. And when we come to single-sex spaces, it's complicated because I think there's a thorny question about how far in the transition process somebody is. If somebody has transitioned in their teens and has anatomically transitioned, so physically has a vagina rather than a penis, for them to be in a men's prison would be very complicated and dangerous for them.
It's not possible if you're born with a penis to have a vagina. You can have plastic surgery, but you can't make a vagina. That's just something we should understand at the outset in this discussion. But I think your comparison with religion is very good. I think that's exactly right. People believe all kinds of different things, and we can live together and work together.
But if we take what you're saying, and this is your thesis, and someone not because they've had surgery, neither has a penis or a vagina, then then what are you saying? Where should that person be?
Well, you can't ask, for one thing. And the other thing to know is that most people who identify as trans don't have surgery, and that's absolutely their right. And so in lots of situations where you have male and female spaces, you can also have a mixed or unisex option. So you're just not asking. You're not saying, I don't think any man should be trying to enter a women's space and having a conversation about his genitals or lack of genitals. It's just not appropriate.
Rebecca?
And so,
sure, but if we're talking, the places where this is, the number of times this comes up as a real world issue is fairly small, but the places that people are particularly worried about are prisons, hospitals, and changing rooms. And in those instances, your anatomy is relevant because, again, if you present as somebody who has a vagina, it is reasonable that you would not want to then be in a space full of people who are men, like cis men. And I'm not suggesting, and personally, if I'm in a changing room, I'm not looking very closely at other women's bodies. If somebody presents as female, I don't understand why it would be a problem for me to share space with them. Obviously, if somebody is, last week they decided to call themselves Jane and they've got a full beard, understandably a woman might feel uncomfortable, but we have to allow for the fact that there are lots of different types of trans people and as there are lots of different types of cis people.
Yes, that's absolutely right. And service providers cannot decide, oh, well, you look passable. Perhaps you don't have a penis. Perhaps your voice doesn't sound like a man. Perhaps you're not going to scare the women. They have to be able to have clear rules that they can explain to everyone. Is this hospital bay single sex or is it mixed sex? Is this change room single sex or mixed sex? It's a simple question and answer.
But these are presenting so rarely in life. Hospitals, generally speaking, aren't single sex.
No, but
the number of people going to prison
are.
and also
hospital bays, where you share not necessarily a whole ward, but just like a bay with beds in the same room.
Is it not
and you've got that gown on.
Sex, though, generally speaking, those aren't single sex. I think it'd be nice if they were, personally, but they're not. The government has committed that all of those are single sex, apart from like emergency medicine. But if you're in, for example, if you're in a mental health ward, that should be single sex. You have people walking around, interacting with each other. If you're in a mental health ward, you should have private rooms. Like, if the government is going to make
sure, but you're also interacting.
Can I ask this? Is it not extraordinary how in whatever amount of minutes we've been doing this, 6, 7, 8 minutes, how many times we've referred to penis and vaginas? And I'm asking the question for this reason. Like, you have not, Maya, introduced even the possibility, and it surely applies to most grown-up adults, that a female can be in a space where there is a naked man and there's not a nuclear war and it's not sexual. And indeed, in some countries, people have communal showers. And indeed, men can be in front of naked women and they are not these automatic predators.
Absolutely.
So what is this about the whole importance of a penis and vagina?
The word is
We're
consent.
not animals.
The word is consent. We're not animals. We can share all kinds of spaces with members of the opposite sex where we consent. But when a woman goes into a space that has a sign on the door that says female only, she is not consenting to share that with somebody with a penis. When she's getting undressed, she's not expecting to be looked at by someone with a penis. And
presumably she's not expecting to be looked at by someone with a vagina either.
Well, yeah, if you go to the gym and there's an open changing room, everyone can see everyone, but it's not sexual. You don't expect there to be a man in there. The most common
Sorry,
sex
when you
crime,
say it's not sexual, and I'm sorry to cut across you, but when you say it's not sexual, you don't think that there are lesbians in that changing room with other women?
Don't be ridiculous.
How am I being ridiculous?
When a lesbian is not a man.
But the point behind my question is, for the vast majority of people, surely it's not sexual, no matter who it is.
If
That's
a man comes into a changing room where women and girls are undressing, that is inappropriate. The two most common sex crimes are voyeurism and exposure. And they're very common. Most women, many, many women and girls, the first time they see an adult penis is because a man exposes himself to her. So when you go into a women's space where you're getting undressed, you don't expect any men to be there. My husband is a perfectly nice man, but he should not be in a women's changing room, and he would not go into a women's changing room.
I think that it is difficult when we start suggesting that I don't think the changing room issue is about people perving. Like, I'm a bisexual woman. I use women's changing rooms all the time. I see women. I think they look beautiful. I think they're attractive. That doesn't mean that I'm some kind of sex person.
Absolutely.
Or doing anything towards them. I agree. It is about consent. I think the difficulty is we have to balance out everybody's needs here. And I think I completely understand why women don't want to change in the same room as somebody who is anatomically different from them. But to me, the answer to that is more family changing rooms, more enclosed changing rooms, more third spaces. And I think most trans people are very, very decent. There is a small number of horrible sex pest criminals who are also trans, and those people are evil. I would throw the book at Isla Bryson like anybody else would, but most of these people would much rather use a third space, a small contained space where they're not having to get their bits out and shock a woman. That's not what most of these people want to do. Most trans people just want to be left alone.
Exactly, and that's why you should have clear rules so that everyone knows what to expect. They should know not to try and negotiate. You know, lots of trans people, they may not mean harm, but they have unrealistic ideas of how well they pass. Women can tell if they hear a man's voice, if they see the way a man walks, his shoulders, his hands.
Oh, but the thing is, Maya, I
don't pass as well as they think they do. I'm sorry.
My problem with that is I think we've stumbled into a kind of McCarthyism, and I have friends who are butch lesbians or who are quite sort of androgynous presenting, who have started being like witch hunted by women and have been accused of not being female when they've entered female spaces, and they are as female as you or I. So I think the idea that we can sort of tell is a bit worrying.
Wouldn't it be better if men didn't even try and get into women's spaces and try and put women on edge?
Well, I think the argument would be that those aren't men; those are trans women.
Well, as you said, women... that's a different religion. I mean, some people have a religion that a man with a penis who looks just like a man can be a woman, and we have to understand that most women don't believe that, and women have the right not to change with men, and it's about consent.
But this conversation surely goes beyond a changing room. This conversation goes into identity, the rights of people to be accepted for who they are and how they want to be described. Does it not? Even in terms of respect that society should afford someone. What is so difficult about calling someone she if that makes that person feel part of our society? What is so difficult?
I view it like if somebody has a title, you might not believe that Lord or Lady is a real title or something that you think is right, but it's a respect and it's a convention that we have, and it's polite and it's the right thing to do to use it.
The counter to that is for those people, Rebecca, who have an alternative opinion, they think that the English language is being mangled, and the definition of she is someone who was born female, and you then get to the stage that if you embrace calling someone who's been born biological male she and her, then you get to the stage with other parts of our language where parts of the National Health Service are frightened of using or refusing to use the word breastfeeding, and you have to say chest feeding. I did a 10-part podcast, part of the NHS. Well, it was an absolute instruction. Do not use the word breastfeeding.
That's not true.
It is true. I investigated it. It is true.
They didn't say do not. They said offer. I had a baby fairly recently, and every single person.
Sorry, you're right. You're right. It was guidance.
Mother,
sorry, to be precise.
It was not an instruction.
But to be precise, you're right. It was guidance, but it was guidance from an official trust.
Yeah, it was guidance in Brighton, which is the wokest part of the country, to offer the opportunity. I was never asked if I wanted to be called chest feeding or breastfeeding. I was, however, bullied by lactation consultants. And the stupid thing about this conversation is that there are so few people who are impacted by this, and there are so many actual issues that affect women every single day. And what bothers me is that the government uses this as a culture war sideshow to go, look, we're going to do this.
Women's issues are not a culture war.
But this isn't the biggest issue facing women by any stretch of the imagination. Like, there are so many domestic violence rates.
We can think about different issues, but if we can't think about women as a group that have particular needs and particular vulnerabilities but if we think, well, some men are female, some men get pregnant, some women are male, some women are rapists, some women have penises, What is the difference between those two groups? Those two groups are the same. They're both mixed-sex groups.
I think the saddest thing is
think
that
about the group that is female and that has vulnerabilities and needs and is subject to sex discrimination and sexual harassment.
Yeah,
and are not men. They're not male.
But the sad thing is that there are so many brilliant women in this country who are wasting their energies arguing about the fact that one NHS trust used one piece of misguided information, who could be putting their efforts towards other things that really impact women.
Hold on, Maya, 1 second. Let's let Rebecca finish.
If I can finish, I think the issue is that because women like J.K. Rowling have been told to shut up and sit down, that's the place they focus their energies. And women should be listened to. Women should be allowed to express these thoughts. I understand what happened to you, Myra, and I think it was terrible. But specifically, it's the wrong investment of energies from brilliant women. And I wish we could just focus on some other more pressing issues rather than going over and over this, because it's like less than 1% of people in the UK are trans.
But 50% of people are women, and that's a group. I wish we could talk about that without losing our jobs. It happened to me, and every week I have people calling me saying they're being investigated at work. Sometimes they're able to say my name because I won my case, and that stops the investigation.
Can you just explain to people when you talk about your case, Maya? Can you just give them a background to it?
In 2018, when the government was first consulting about changing the Gender Recognition Act, I tweeted about it, and the place where I worked, somebody reported that as transphobia because I said that, what I've been saying on this show, and I was investigated and I lost my job. I took my employer to tribunal for belief discrimination, so I said they shouldn't discriminate against me for having the perfectly ordinary belief that men are men and women are women, and that matters. And initially I lost, and on the day I lost, or the day after J.K. Rowling first tweeted about this issue, and then I went back to court and I won. And because it's legal precedent, it means that other people, if they are investigated or harassed or discriminated at work for saying men are not women, they have rights. And it's very widespread. There are witch hunts, not just against women like J.K. Rowling, but nurses, social workers, teachers, all kinds of women who need to be able to say, and men who need to be able to say in their jobs, yes, I respect your identity, but I also understand the difference between men and women, and where my job is protecting women and children and protecting trans people's health. Everyone needs to know their own sex. I need to be able to talk about what sex people are. And those people are being hounded at work.
Final word to you, Rebecca.
I think there's an over-reporting issue, and I think honestly the key here is I really feel that women have been told to shut up when they talk about this, and that's made this debate really toxic. And I think women have every right to feel however they do about trans issues, but I wish that we could try and take the nastiness out of it and just try and remember that these are real people, the vast majority of whom are not sex offenders, who are just trying to live their life with privacy and dignity.
Okay. Rebecca and Maya, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.